Adventures with Books has been paid for in part by the Sholo Library Friends. If you'd like to become a member of the Sholo Library Friends, please call 532-4070.
There's a bluntly cone-shaped sponge-like mushroom called the common morel, and I'm gonna give me some.
Have you ever seen a mushroom out in the woods? They're really cool. They come in all different colors and shapes and sizes. I brought a book to share today called Mushroom in the Rain by Mira Ginsberg, and this has all different kinds of mushrooms in it too. One day, an ant was caught in the rain. Where can I hide? He wondered. He saw a tiny mushroom peeking out of the ground in a clearing, and he hid under it. He sat there waiting for the rain to stop, but the rain came down harder and harder and harder. Kind of like the storms we get up here in the summertime. Oh, a wet butterfly crawled up to the mushroom. "Oh, Cousin Ant, let me come in from the rain. I'm so wet I cannot fly." "How can I let you in?" said the ant. "There's barely enough room for one." "It doesn't matter," said the butterfly. "Better crowded than wet." So the ant moved over and made room for the butterfly. And the rain came down harder and harder and harder. Look at that, his wings barely fit. A mouse ran up. "Let me in under that mushroom. I am drenched to the bone." "How can we let you in? There's no more room here." "Just move a little closer." They huddled closer and let the mouse in. And the rain came down and came down and came down and would not stop. Look at that, they just barely fit. Who else is coming along? Oh, a little sparrow hopped up to the mushroom crying, "Oh, my feathers are dripping. My wings are so tired. Let me in under that mushroom to dry out and rest until the rain stops." "But there's no room here. Please move over just a little." So they all moved over, and there was just room enough for the sparrow. It's going to be quite a crowd under there. Look at that. Still raining. Then a rabbit hopped into the clearing and saw the mushroom. "Oh, hide me," he cried. "Save me. A fox is chasing me." "Poor rabbit," said the ant. "Let's crowd ourselves in a little more and take him in." So he crawled under there too. Hopefully they can save him. As soon as they hid the rabbit, the fox came running up. There's the rabbit in the back. "Have you seen that rabbit? Which way did he go?" he asked. "We haven't seen him." The fox came near and sniffed. "There's a rabbit smell around. Isn't he hiding here?" "You silly fox. How could a rabbit get in here? Don't you see there isn't any room?" The fox turned up his nose, flicked his tail, and ran off. He even looked under there. That's funny. By then the rain was over. The sun looked out from behind the clouds, and everyone came out from the mushroom, bright and merry. There's even a rainbow. It's always a good sign the rain might be stopping. The ant looked at his neighbors. "How could this be? At first I had hardly room enough under the mushroom just for myself, and in the end all 5 of us were able to sit under it." Those look bigger. "Quaha, Quah-ha-ha! Somebody laughed loudly behind them. They turned and saw a fat green frog sitting on top of the mushroom, shaking his head at them. Quah-ha-ha! Said the frog. Don't you know what happens to a mushroom in the rain? And he hopped away, still laughing. The ant, the butterfly, the mouse, the sparrow, and the rabbit looked at one another and then at the mushroom. And suddenly they knew why there was room enough under that mushroom for them all. Do you know? Can you guess what happens to a mushroom when it rains? Look at all those different colors and shapes. Oh, what's happening? Look at that. It grows. So look how big it is now. That is a great book by Mira Ginsberg. And now let's go out in the woods and look at some real mushrooms and see how big or small or what color those are. Hi, we're up here in the White Mountains. And in Arizona, the mushroom season is actually backwards for most of the rest of the country. We get our mushrooms in the summertime after the monsoon rains, which from the looks of things is actually starting to drip a little bit. The monsoon rains come in the summertime, and that's when the mushrooms come up. Most other places in the country, it's either spring or fall. So there's all kinds of things out here that we might see today. There's poisonous things, some things you can eat, some are just really pretty to look at. So we're just going to kind of look around and see what might be growing up here today in the woods. This mushroom is just growing right by the path. I think it's a Cortinarius. Part of the fun of mushroom picking also is to kind of guess and see what kind of mushroom it is before you turn it over. You can kind of see looks like a cobweb on the stalk here, and that's an identifying characteristic. This is a Cortinarius, and it has kind of a cobwebby veil. The spore print, as you can see, this would have been the same color as the stalk. All these rusty colored spores have stuck to that veil right there, so you can kind of cheat if you're an expert and tell that this has kind of rust colored spores for this mushroom. These are all poisonous, but they are kind of pretty, and a lot of them grow all over the place in the woods. They have a really garlicky smell to them. That's another way to identify certain species of mushrooms is by their scent. Some smell like radishes, some smell like apricots, these smell like garlic. So there's a lot of things that you have to pay attention to when you're trying to identify a mushroom. Or fir trees. And as an added bonus, if you look up the tree right up there, that is actually a fungus growing also on the aspen tree that will eventually kill the tree over time. And they actually look like branches of coral that you might see in the ocean. And these always occur on wood. There's a word called lignicolous that means occurring on wood for mushrooms. And that means that if you're looking for this mushroom, you can always look on wood to find it. They don't grow anywhere else. And I always like looking for mushrooms out in the woods. There's all different shapes and colors, and it's kind of like looking for Easter eggs. You just never know what you might see. These mushrooms that are growing down here are growing in a ring. I'm not sure what kind of mushrooms these are. About 50% of what you find out in the woods are medium-sized brown mushrooms, so there's a lot of species that you don't really I haven't ever tried to identify this one before, and that's okay. But they're starting to grow here, here, and then they go behind this log and actually around behind that tree. And I also wanted to point out that when you pick a mushroom and look at it, this would be like the apple part of an apple tree. The seed, the apple seed, would be the spores that come out of the gills of the mushrooms, and they're microscopic. You can't see the spores unless there's millions of them compressed together, and then you kind of get a general color like that rusty brown Cortinarius. But one spore is microscopic, so you couldn't see it. The actual plant, or like the apple tree part, is underground, and you hardly ever see that, but it kind of looks like mold under the ground, kind of white, and that is the mycelium. So that is actually the tree part that grows underground, so we're looking at the apple here. Now, I don't know what species this mushroom is, but if you can look at the kind of white color on the ground, I'm gonna guess that this mushroom has a white spore print. And we can just kind of dig around there a little bit. Now you can actually see a little tiny bit of the mycelium that I was talking about. That's the plant that grows underground. And like I said, it just kind of looks kind of like white mold. Sometimes there's little threads and things. And if you're picking a mushroom, as long as you don't dig up the ground and dig up the underneath part, it's just like picking an apple. You won't hurt the mushroom at all. If you rake the soil, that will kill the mycelium underneath, and that mushroom will not grow there anymore. So it's really important not to do that. Mushroom right here is a hawkwing, which you can tell from the top, it sort of does look like the same color as a hawkwing, or Hydnum imbricatum. This is kind of a very cool mushroom because, as you can see, when I turned it over, this one has teeth instead of gills or pores. So that's a very important identifying characteristic, and I'll turn it up on the side. And you can, like I said, it looks just like little teeth in there, like a little comb. So that's a very cool mushroom. Here's even more different shapes. We have round puffballs right here, and in the fall, these are just by the hundreds everywhere. And the little ball will eventually get a little hole in the top, and then as it dries out, the little spores will puff out of that hole and spread millions of spores around. As we know, not every spore will turn into a mushroom, but it's kind of fun to poke them with your toe or something and watch them puff out. And we also have some yellow coral over here, and this is Ramaria aurea. Aurea meaning gold. And this is another one that looks just like coral that you might see in the ocean. If I cut it in half, you can really it almost looks like a cauliflower or a yellow broccoli. So that's kind of a cool species. I'm standing on top of a huge pile of little pine cone chips, and this is actually a squirrel mitten. You can see the piles of pine cones right here on the ground in several places kind of buried. The squirrels pick the pine cones and stick them down there, and then they'll come and eat them later when they need food. It's not uncommon. The squirrels like to eat the mushrooms too, so they'll pick the mushrooms and run off with them, and they'll stick them in a crack or in the crotch of a tree, or they'll poke them down in these middens for later, like a snack, kind of like we do. And a lot of mushroom mycelium, spores and things get moved that way and poked into the ground so they can start a new patch somewhere else. So it's really kind of a big help to the forest. I also found another shape of mushroom. This is called clavaria, or it's a club mushroom. This always grows in moss, and this can be kind of hard to see because it's very purple, and it blends in really well with the moss and the pine needles and things, so sometimes that's really hard to spot, but that's kind of a cool little mushroom. And This one kind of has, this is called a vulva. It's kind of the bulb that grows underground. So when you're picking a mushroom, it's really important to get the whole mushroom out and not just cut it off, because if you miss that, this particular family, Amanita, has deadly poisonous mushrooms in it. So it's really important that you make sure you got the right mushroom. This one's kind of pretty. It has a ring or annulus on the stalk. That's another identifying characteristic. And then this one also this one's pretty waterlogged, but it has little tiny patches on the top of the cap. So that's another identifying characteristic. Some mushrooms have relationships. The red and white spotted fly amanita there, it's very pretty. That one's very poisonous, but when those start to come up, and look, here's my proof. The Boletus edulis, what they call in the cooking shows portinis or seeps. When you see one, you can start looking for the other, so that's very exciting. And these are perfect little buttons right here. They are just starting to come up. Called Hypomyces lactiflorum, or the lobster mushroom. You can see why it's called the lobster mushroom. And the really weird part about this particular mushroom is it starts off looking like a regular mushroom, and then this orange Hypomyces takes over the original mushroom, and it changes the texture. There's no more gills. It's just kind of one big chunky, and it's very crisp, almost like jicama or celery if you cut it in half. So this looks nothing like the original mushroom, and it turns it this bright lobster orange. So that's kind of a really funky and cool mushroom to see. These mushrooms are actually cousins of the kind that you buy at the store. They're called a Woodland Agaric, and like I said, you can see they have the brown gills and big ants in them too. Go away, this is mine. And they have a stalk and a ring, so this is kind of like the ones you buy at the store, only a lot bigger. This particular mushroom is called a waxy cap, because if you look underneath the cap, it almost looks like the gills are made out of wax if you touch them. And this is kind of a strange mushroom. Its name is Hygrophorus pewterinus, and the way I remember this, it doesn't smell very nice, so it's pewterinus. That one's easy to remember. This is a big, humongous conch called a conch polypore that's growing on this tree. This part of it is dead, and so it's kind of helping recycle that back into the soil. And always remember that mushrooms are the great decomposers. That's kind of their whole job, is to break things down and kind of finish up the circle of life and, you know, get it back into the soil so it can start over again. This is what happens to a mushroom when it gets too much rain and a little too old. This is a Boletus edulis. Here's the button. This is what it looks like when it first comes up. And this is the other end of its life cycle when it's big and old and scary and probably full of worms. So we're not going to keep that one. And the nice thing about mushrooms is you can just throw it over your shoulder, and that will turn into a bunch more mushrooms next year. When you go out in the woods, there's a lot of other really cool stuff. This is a little patch of orchids, believe it or not. There's over 12 species of orchids that grow in Arizona. and they come out different times of year and in different habitats. There's several that live in the woods and actually bloom in the summertime. And I hope you saw some really interesting and cool things today. Please remember, it's okay to always look at wild mushrooms or take photographs of them. Do not pick them or touch them because some of them can make you really sick or even kill you. So it's really important to not mess with them, to just look at them if you don't know what you're doing. If you want to learn more about mushrooms that you can eat, join a local mushroom club. The mushroom club here in Arizona is actually called the Arizona Mushroom Club. If you just look that up on Google, you can get their email address and learn how to join. The dues are not very much, and that's a great way to learn how to do things. So I'll see you back at the library. That was a really fun foray trip out into the woods. I just love going out there and just seeing all the different mushrooms. There's different sizes, different shapes, different colors. Some of them are poisonous, some are just cool to look at. So it's always fun it's sort of like a big Easter egg hunt. You just go out in the woods and you never know what you might see, or sometimes things are really big if there's a lot of rain. So it's really cool to see what's out there. I brought some books that you can check out from the library. The first one's called The Life Cycle of a Mushroom. And this is a first book, so it's not too long, difficult. There's the threads or hyphae that grow under the soil. When you're looking at the mushroom, like I said, it's kind of like the apple on a tree. The tree actually grows underground. That's the little threads in the soil. New spores. One spore can make a new mushroom or move on. Let's see, mushroom farms. That's where you get the ones from the store. They often grow them in caves, so that's kind of cool. And that's the safest mushroom to eat, is the one that you go and buy at the store. So that's a cool book. I brought another book called Fungi. A lot of mushroom books put the red and white. This is Amanita Muscaria, or the fairy tale mushroom. It's poisonous, but it's really pretty to look at. So here's the parts of a mushroom. This is a cool book if you're kind of more interested in the scientific side. A mycologist is a scientist who studies mushrooms, so you can read a little bit more about that. There's those hyphae or threads again. All kinds. There's a spore under the microscope. That's what they look like. Spores are all different shapes and colors too, so that's another way you can identify them. I don't usually use a microscope, but all kinds of things. Killer mushrooms, different poisonous things. So this is a cool book if you're a little more interested in science. Here's another one. This is Moulds, Mushrooms, and Other Fungi. They're all kind of related. There's that red and white Amanita Muscaria again. Here's a fairy ring. If there's enough rain, they'll grow in a ring. So this also is kind of a fun scientific book. Talks about mushrooms in food and yeast and things like that. So that's very cool. This last book is called Katya's Book of Mushrooms, and it has like little woodblock prints. And this is about a woman kind of like me who likes to go out into the woods and look for different things. She talks about how some of them, hen of the woods kind of looks like a chicken. There's an octopus stinkhorn that looks a lot like an octopus. So a lot of mushroom names come from animal names and stuff. Where mushrooms live, they live in all different kinds of habitats. So this is a really cool book too. And this book also has the parts of the mushroom in the back. So it's really an interesting thing if you want to take some time and study it. Well, I hope you saw some fun and cool things today. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Adventures with Books has been paid for in part by the Sholo Library Friends. If you'd like to become a member of the Sholo Library Friends, please call 532-4070.